Welcome to the Exceptional Educators Playbook. I'm Doug Smith, along with Ms. Chastity Kraft from Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. And the purpose of this podcast is to offer professional learning opportunities to meet the needs of educators while giving teachers a platform to share their experiences and expertise. Every month we will highlight a different topic every educator needs to know. Each week the topic will be broken down into content-specific categories. Week 1 will explain what it would look like in literacy. Week 2 will show how it works in math. Week 3 allows you to look at the topic through the social emotional behavioral lens, and Week 4 offers modifications and models for the low incidence community. Today we'll be discussing co-teaching and collaboration. And we're excited to have Ms. Brenda Holmes and Ms. Dion Bates from Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. They will share with us a brief overview of each of the 6 co-teaching models developed by Marilyn Friend. I talk about how co-teaching lends to improving outcomes of all students, not just with students with disabilities, but all students, and then show us or discuss ways that specially designed instruction is applied via the co-teaching model. So welcome, ladies. I appreciate you joining us today. So first off, let's just do a brief introduction. So Ms. Dion Bates, if you don't mind, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Doug. Yes, my name is Dion Bates, and I'm one of the co-directors here at KVEC, and I'm the Implementation and Improvement Lead. And this is I'm working on my 25th year in education, and this is my 7th year at Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative.
Thank you. Ms. Brenda?
I'm Brenda Holmes. I'm the other co-director here at Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and I am over the monitoring and results. This is my 38th year in education, so I've been around a little while.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. Appreciate that. So as I said in the opening, we're going to be discussing Marilyn Friend's 6 co-teaching models, and going to just do a brief overview of those models, and then we're going to include on what it would look like and some advantages and disadvantages and some recommended uses and opportunities and challenges. So whatever you ladies feel like sharing with us. And as I said, co-teaching, we'll start out with a brief definition of co-teaching. Co-teaching is the instructional arrangement in which a general education teacher and a special education teacher deliver core instruction along with specialized instruction as needed to a diverse group of students in a single physical space. Co-teaching partnerships require educators to make joint instructional decisions and share responsibility and accountability for student learning. So those 6 co-teaching models are parallel teaching, station teaching, teaming, alternative teaching, one teach, one assist, and one teach and one observe. And so I think Ms. Dion's going to start us out and discuss a little bit about some of the advantages and opportunities provided with the parallel teaching model.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, when we think about the parallel teaching, we think about 2 teachers working collaboratively in a classroom, and each of those teachers take an active role in delivering that instruction. So the class could be divided into 2 groups, and they are simultaneously receiving the same content. And it allows, this opportunity allows teachers to have much more control over those small groups. And you know, that's real helpful when you think about delivering content, but some kids need the different kinds of supports. And a good example of a parallel teaching we observed in a 3rd grade classroom was that one of the teachers, the regular ed teacher, had a group of students in the front of the classroom. The special education teacher was working with a group of students in the back end of the classroom. The teacher in the front was using the dry erase board, and she was using her Interwrite board. They're teaching the same content, but the teacher in the back then was using a graphic organizer and whiteboards and having the kids just a little different delivery model to address the needs of those auditory learners, those visual learners, and those kinesthetic learners. So parallel teaching really gives us information about how we can group kids based on, you know, their learning styles or supports that they might need. The important thing to know about parallel teaching is, though, that we have those in those heterogeneous groups. We don't always want students with disabilities in the same group all the time. We want those students with their non-disabled peers. We want them with kids that can give them some peer support as well. So it's a good opportunity for those kids to interact with all the kids in the classroom. Another benefit of that is that kids can have an opportunity to be successful and have exemplar models.
Thank you. Yes, I think one of the things that kind of caught my attention there was that this parallel teaching tends to lean toward that social aspect of students with disabilities and without disabilities, and looking at all students as, you know, just students, and we're not looking at that disability. So thank you. And I like the point about the learning styles. That way you can place those students at how their best learning style that suits them. You can teach and address that learning style as well. So thank you. So Ms. Brenda, if you don't mind, would you give us a brief discussion on, I've lost my note page.
Teaching.
Yeah, thank you. One more time. What was it? Okay, yeah, station teaching. Thank you, Ms. Brenda.
Okay, so when we're looking at station teaching, we're looking at co-teaching partners that divide the instruction into 2 or more segments, with each partner having their own responsibility for delivering that instruction within that station. Sometimes you see 3 stations and sometimes you see 4 stations. And we have actually seen more, but when you get beyond 4, it's sort of hard because your classroom is not that big, and you have to have a classroom that is suitable for the stations that you decide that you're going to have. One reason why they actually have 4 stations sometimes is that we do have instructional assistants, and sometimes we may have one in our classroom, so we can actually use that instructional assistant as one of the instructors in a station. So you have the regular education teacher, the special education teacher, the para-educator, and then you have what we call an independent station, where the students will work independently on that skill that you are, or the content that you're teaching. We do want to see some type of result in that independent station. The independent station should have something that you turn in. That way the students will go ahead and do their work. If they're not going to turn it in, sometimes they're more apt to not even try to do the work. So we have to make sure that we have something that they need to turn in. We do have some tips for implementing the station teaching. And, you know, we need to use timers and some signals. We need those timers because the students need to know what time they need to change over to go to the next station. They also need to practice those before they do this, because they won't know which way to go, the routine that you're going to use. So practicing this prior to, it will be helpful and it won't be chaotic. Now, the first time or two, it may be chaotic, but once they get into the routine and learn it, then they won't have to worry about it anymore. The teachers won't have to worry about it anymore. So we do need to practice those class procedures, those routines of how we're going to transfer from station to station. We also can have colored index cards for the students. That way they'll know what roles they're going to play at those stations. And then sometimes when we're doing those independent stations, I would recommend them do some table tents that have instructions written on those. Since this is an independent station, there will not be an adult there. So we need to make sure that they understand what they are to do during that station. And the teacher may emphasize that prior to starting the station teaching when they first start. We always need to have something to turn in, like I said, for the students that are at the independent station. So we'll have something for them to look forward to, feedback when we give them their feedback on what they turn in. One big issue that we may have is some kids may finish independent station early. So we might have to have some anchor activities for them to do, and we need to discuss that with the class prior to starting all of this. And those are just activities that they can do, and they can be a list of them. You can list them on chart paper on a board or something so they will understand what they can do and won't interrupt the other students while they're working.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. I like the way that you stress that sometimes when you're getting into first starting station teaching or any of these co-teaching models, that you have to practice, you have to review, you have to provide them with that routine and those procedures and walk them through that and practice that. I also like I like this station teaching as a way to get students used to being able to transition and working on those transitioning skills from activity to activity. And plus you as a teacher get to work with all kids, not just a certain group here and there. So, and I like that. Now, would you recommend that the students do the ones that are transitioning, or do the teachers transition? Do they move, or do the students move?
Well, if you have a big enough room, the students sometimes do need to get up and move, especially those that may have some behavior issues, ADHD that can't sit a long time. That would be beneficial, but sometimes we're not fortunate enough to have a big enough room, and the teachers may have to rotate.
Okay, thank you. Anything?
Well, I was just thinking that you was talking about going back to the routines and the procedures, and which we say, I think we say this every time about consistency, because for the kids, if they know what to expect and how it decreases that anxiety, so they want to know what to do, and so it's also going to decrease any potential behavior issues that may arise. So I love that going through. And if you work in an elementary setting, you will see the first week or sometimes 2 weeks in kindergarten, sometimes K1, all you see them do is learning procedures. As far as going to the bathroom and in the classroom in the school. So I think that it sets the tone for the whole year.
Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Dion, teaming.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the teaming approach, or sometimes we call that team teaching, but that's when you have that general education teacher and that special education teacher partnership, and both of them are fully engaged in leading the delivery of core instruction. So they're doing that at the same time. Their roles may be just a little bit different, but they are a team. They're partners in the delivery of this content. And it's that delivery of that content's happening at the same time. And so the role of those educators are both important roles. One of the teachers may be leading a large group. One of the other teachers may be modeling speak and chart or using a strategy. And that's real helpful. I remember back teaching an illiteracy unit we were working on, and we were teaching a lesson. And so if I was delivering the lesson, or if my co-teacher was delivering the lesson, the other one would chart. And so the added benefit of that is we were teaching a unit on plot, story structure and plot diagram. And so we were using that plot diagram. And so kids were able to follow along with that story resolution as we were talking about it. So it provides that visual. So that speak and chart, you could be giving them an example of how that looks in a graphic organizer. So it's really an added benefit that you have those two high quality professionals delivering that content. One of the things, the tips to think about that is, you may have a signal so that you're a cue between the partners that indicate, who's, as you take turns, or that reciprocal approach to that. But also, one of the teachers might just ask a question for clarification, right? So you may be going along and teaching the lesson, but the other teachers, wants to clarify that. Another example would be in a math classroom. If one teacher is modeling the way to teach problem solving through one approach, the other teacher may have another approach that could be modeled for students that didn't get it that way. Again, that's another way that we're really addressing the needs of all students. The same thing with graphic organizers. You can integrate that. That's a tip to think about with team teaching, about how you can really model that as you go along. And we did have a lot of success when I think about that, that story structure and looking at that plot and that plot diagram. I mean, it really added benefit to the delivery of that content because it allowed for that visual representation of what we were talking about.
I like the way you mentioned with teaming, and may not think about it, but I think it would assist in modeling how to communicate with, or their students communicating with each other. Even though you have a signal or whatever, when we're communicating or talking, we wait for that pause, or we wait for that other person before we start talking. So I think that would help model those skills, those social skills like that.
Absolutely, yes.
So, and that's just something that came to my mind when you said have a signal or a cue or whatever. So,
because kids they have a hard, well, I just talked over you about,
see,
I didn't use my social cue, but kids do have a hard time picking up on that. They don't know. So having that model just That's a great point.
Oh, thank you. And plus, where we've been virtual, and these kids have been out of school for so long, and you know, not face to face, and not with their peers, and with the adults. It's going to be difficult to make sure that you're modeling that behavior and teaching those behaviors when those kids come back into school. But thank you, Miss Chastity. Miss
Let me interject. I'm sorry. Can I interject one more thing, just real quick about the team teaching? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was that we've been able to preview some really good exemplar models of team teaching in a virtual setting. So there was a teacher that shared with us his collaboration with a teacher in a science lesson. And so that you can think about the delivery of these models through that virtual lens. So it can happen either in a face-to-face setting, it can happen in a virtual setting, but it can happen in a blended setting because you may have some kids at home, but the work can still happen in this way. We can still meet the needs of kids, thinking through those platforms, whatever it is, if it's a virtual or face-to-face, but we can do that, but it just requires a little planning on our part.
Thank you. Ms. Brenda, would you talk about alternative teaching, please?
Okay, so when we're thinking about alternative teaching, this may be a time the students are having some issues with the content that's being taught, and they may have taken a test, and some of them may not have done so well. For those students that didn't do so well, one of the teachers, either the regular education teacher or the special education teacher, it does not matter which one, and they need to rotate anyway, so each of them get the responsibility to do alternative teaching. But what alternative teaching is taking those students back into a group or to the side and using some supportive materials to try to get these students back on track to learn that specific skill that they didn't do well on the first time. They can also use that maybe for pre-teaching as well, because sometimes we know some of the students, not just the special education students, but also regular education students that need that front end upload of maybe some vocabulary or certain other things that they may need to know or to do prior to starting a unit. So that can be used for both the regular education students as well as your special education students. And remember that the roles are exchanged. That way, the teachers will be preparing both as a regular education teacher and as a special education teacher. And if you don't do that, and if a special education teacher is doing it at all times, then the child may go home and say, well, I was in a group with special education today. So that's identifying them as being in that special education setting, and you don't want to do that. And we need to remember when we're doing this alternative teaching that it's not the same special education students all the time, and that it's not the same regular education students all the time. It depends on the skills. You know, if the student is good at one thing and not good at another, so we may not see these kids all the time in an alternative setting. So we need to make sure that we do that. And when we're in those groups, we need to make sure if we need like auditory books, books on tapes, those types of things, dry erase boards to help work their math problems out. That way the teacher can see the boards and don't have to go around and look on the paper. And it would be quicker, because you don't want this alternative setting to last no more than 20 minutes. Normally it's 10 to 15 minutes, but you don't want to exceed a 20-minute time period in that alternative setting, because that will take a whole lot of your class time. And it depends on really what amount of time you do have in that class. So we do need to have some supportive materials to go along with that. Like I said, graphic organizers, those types of things. Dion actually talked about those when she talked about the parallel teaching. We can also use those supportive pieces to go with that.
I like the way you mentioned that they're temporarily formed groups, short amount of times, and the way that you said it'd be important for the teachers to switch roles, because you may, like you said, I may be the special education teacher, and Miss Chastity may be the regular ed teacher, but if the only groups that I ever take are just, little Dougie and little Brenda and little Dion, and that's it, then they're going to start saying, well, that's an easy way to identify those kids. But I I like the way that they need to switch those roles up, and that way you still, all kids get that instruction and that focused on learning for their abilities and their skills. So thank you.
I think it's funny because that's the same exact notes that I have pointed out about the roles and the groups always being different. Because also when your teacher, a lot of times the special education teacher, the students in that classroom, they really don't know what if you're not careful, if you're not doing these models correctly, the special education teacher gets confused with what their role is. The teacher, but the students, they don't know what you're supposed to be doing or who you are. Right. So I think when you do those flexible grouping like that, then all students in that class, whether it doesn't matter, if they have an IEP or not, then they're going to look at you as their teacher. Yeah. And so I think that's, and then of course that builds that rapport for all students and things like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I noted the same thing. So. And
I like the way you kept mentioning all students. They're all our students. And no matter if you're regular ed, special ed, whatever, you're a teacher of all students. So I like that point too. So thank you. Ms. Dion, would you?
Doug, that students are special ed, they're regular education students first.
Yes.
They are receiving special ed services. So they are regular education students.
Thank you. Ms. Dion, one teach, one observe, or one teach, one assist, please.
Okay, Doug. Yeah. So one teach and one assist is just as it entails in that title, is that we have one teacher that is primarily responsible for delivering the content. While the other co-teacher is circulating around the room, they may be providing a level support, some more intensive support for students, and can be used effectively in that manner. A lot of times what happens with this approach, though, is that it's very commonly used, but when we look at the research around it, it's the least effective strategy for co-teaching. But there are times when it is appropriate. There may be some students who are having a difficult time, and that one teacher can just reinforce some skills, but you want to move in and out of that one very quickly. You wouldn't want to spend all of your time in this particular practice, with one teach, one assist. And again, that can be helpful for those kids who are struggling. And I know that you all have made that point a couple times already. It's, not just our students with disabilities, but other students can benefit from that support. And so really, when we look through the lens of the co-teaching approach, everybody wins in this situation. Students with disabilities get all the support that they need, and they get the specially designed instruction. But those students who just need a little extra support kind of get some benefit from it as well. But it's good for proximity control. And so maybe you probably want to think about that from the behavior lens about, if a student's a behavior issue going on, you can use proximity if you use this practice. It could be for modeling a certain kind of behavior that you're expecting, so that the co-teacher can model the behavior while the other teacher is delivering the content. So there's a lot of opportunities to use this practice, but it just needs to be intentional, and the frequency, we really need to be fluid, moving in and out of using other practices, just so we don't get stuck on the same one.
Okay, thank you. And I like the way you said the proximity prompt or proximity control. And then also I would think this model would lend for, you could develop a signal or come up with something with one of your students that if I need help, I can tug at my ear, touch my nose or whatever, and I'll know to get over there and assist that student at that time, and do that quietly and without disrupting class and things like that. So, all right. Thank you, Ms. Dion. Ms. Brenda, would you talk a little bit about one teach, one observe?
Okay, when we're thinking about the one teach, one observe, we're thinking about one of the teachers actually talking about the content, and the other teacher may be going around and collecting data. They may be doing progress monitoring. So it just depends on what the other teacher is doing and what needs to be collected as to what we need to be doing. So what we do is we try to switch those roles around too, because we don't want the special education teacher at all the times collecting that data. Because what we do after we collect that data is both the teachers get together and they analyze that data. and they may need to change their instruction a little bit. You know, we may not be incorporating tactile learning or kinesthetic or auditory, visual, whatever. We may have to just change our content area a little bit, not our content area, but our teaching approach a little bit. And so that all the students can get the material. And once you analyze that data, then you can figure out from there what you need to do to change. Another thing is, like I said, we have to exchange those roles. We don't want the special ed teacher to do that at all times. We need the regular education to do that as well. And we do have some tips that for implementing the one teach, one observe. And a lot of times if you do have those behavior children and they do have IEPs, some 504s, and then you may just have some regular education students in there that are just on a behavior intervention plan. So you might want to monitor those areas of behavior to see if they are performing adequately, or if they are extremely causing issues in the class or whatever. You need that data to talk about it, and may have to do some other things with that particular child or children. Just depends on how many you have in that classroom. Posted homework charts, that helps a lot with these students. So if you post your homework, they can write that down, and that way they'll know what they have to do when they go home. Sometimes they get to start it in the classroom if they have a few minutes left, and then they can take it home. But they need to write down their homework, and it needs to be posted. And materials, when you're looking at that, both teachers need to have access to the materials, and they also need to have access to the special education students and regular education students' materials, so that you can, if you find an exemplar, you can show that to your special education students, because sometimes that's what they need to see. They need to see the exemplars, and not always see the lower ones, you know. So we need to have something that's good for them to look at. What's good about this too is when the teacher is walking around, they can always just lay down a card, and it's called See Me Later card. That way the child will know, well, I need to stay after class and just see the teacher, or I may want to come back into the class if somebody else is talking, so I'm not late to my next class, just to see what the teacher wants. But if I was to get a See Me Later card, yeah, I'd probably want to stay after class and see what's going on, and not worry about it in my next class until I come back.
And I would think, thank you for that, Miss Brenda. And I would think also with, as far as the cards, you could even leave positive notes to the students to help encourage those to keep having those appropriate behaviors, and just, you know, just build them up, increase their self-esteem and things like that. So that might be another way to look at that. Yeah, definitely See Me Later cards. That way, that's a behavior that you've ignored, planned to ignore, and you decided it's something inconsequential that's not going to cause any disruption. I'm not going to interrupt class. I'm just going to give Miss Chastity a note saying you need to talk to me after class. But I would look at using those positive notes as well. I mean, just a spin on it, but I like the See Me Later card ideals. That way you know that, yeah, I saw that what you were doing, it wasn't appropriate at this time. We'll need to talk about that privately. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, so it's not going to blow up in my face and not going to look bad on you. So it just helps the students save face and keeps you out of that power struggle thing that we often get into. So thank you, Miss Brenda. Anything to add?
No.
We're good?
We're
All right.
good.
So Miss Dion, since Miss Brenda went last, we'll let you give an opportunity. Which of these co-teaching models do you recommend, and why do you recommend that model? And then again, this is just your recommendation and your opinion, so we're not endorsing any above the others. Don't get the wrong idea, folks. So just which one of these models do you prefer, or have you used, and would you recommend try to start with or to use in the classroom?
Well, based on my own classroom experience and teaching both with the general education classroom, but also in the special education resource room, station teaching would be the one I go to. And the reason I like the station teaching is that allows me to be able to address student needs in a smaller group setting. And so I can really plan and intentionally design what I want to happen in each one of those stations. You have that regular ed teacher and the special education teacher. Again, that's that same kind of thing I was talking about. The regular ed teacher might be given some information or some reinforcement for a skill, while the other special education teacher is working on something that will support that same, along those same learning lines. It can be the same if you consider that through behavior as well. You can be working, some kids that need to be in a small group for some social skills training can be working in that station, while another teacher is working on something different. And then you have that independent group. So that one, by my experience and just practice, I think that one I like the best for me.
Right, thank you. Ms. Brenda, same question. Which model would you recommend and why? And if it's, just what's your thoughts?
Well, mine is station teaching as well, but if it wasn't station teaching and I had to do something else, it would probably be the parallel teaching, where we divide those two groups up and we're teaching the same content. We're just doing it in different ways, as Dion had already explained what parallel teaching is.
All right, cool, thank you. Ms. Chastity, what would be your preference? Station teaching as well?
Well, as you got my nod when Dion had mentioned that, yeah. So I was amened her when she mentioned that, and that is my favorite. I feel like the kids like it better too. I don't know. The engagement was, they felt more comfortable, and you got more out of them in that small group and being able to have all students. So yeah, station teaching is my favorite.
And I think, and I like the fact with the station teaching, if you're fortunate enough to have an instructional assistant or a paraprofessional or whatever in that classroom with you, that gives them something to do with all the kids, and all the kids look at them as teachers and educators, and is there to support that, rather than just a secretary to run and get stuff and make copies and things like that. So that, I think that helps everyone in that situation. So
it does.
All right. Thank you, ladies. So we'll any last as we're closing or getting ready to close. So what are some advice or final thoughts you'd like to share with teachers on using co-teaching or the co-teaching models?
Well, I think that all of them need to be explained to the students. I think the teachers should use all of those models as practice, and not to do them all in 1 week, because we may need to just start on one, and it may take a couple of weeks to get that down pat and then move to another one. Again, you have your whole group approaches and you've got your small group approaches. So it just depends on what you're going to be doing as well. And then, of course, the station teaching and parallel teaching, alternative teaching, those three are the big rocks. Those is where you get the more bang for your buck. And when you go into your one assist, one observe, and that just don't, it's not very good. Like I said, it's only for collecting data and walking around the room and monitoring to make sure the students are on track. Or if there's a behavior issue, you may have to go around and use that proximity to let them know you're there, so maybe they'll not misbehave. So we have to remember those things like that right there.
Yeah. Ms. Dion?
Well, one thing is that by using the co-teaching approaches, you are able to exercise and use fully the expertise of two highly qualified professionals in a setting. So it benefits all students. And so I think that's a big takeaway, is that co-teaching gives us the ability to reach more, touch more kids, and have a greater impact. And one thing I would say about co-teaching is that really planning and intentionally selecting a particular co-teaching practice based on what you're teaching, what the content is, what the learning styles of your students are, are really value added components to any classroom. So I mean, the benefits are far outweigh anything else. It's just that we bring a better game to the classroom when we do it collectively.
All right, thank you. So kind of wrapping up a little bit, just some of the notes and things that I kind of took away from our discussion today. As far as parallel teaching, One of the things that I'd like to remind you of is that it increases opportunities to respond and to participate for all students, and it lends to that inclusion of all students, especially ed and grad students together, working in groups together. I think with station teaching, like I said, already discussed a little bit, and that seems to be the consensus, the favorite of the folks was that, you know, the kids get to move about. You probably have fewer behavior issues because the students are able to get up and move around. Also, it's increased participation from all students. And then, like we said earlier, those paraprofessionals being able to contribute to that classroom in a teaching manner rather than just the clerical duties that we see them at times. You know, I always treated mine always did better handling the classroom than I did. So I high praise to those folks. They do a really difficult job for what they're doing. So I really was appreciative of my paraeducators. As far as teaming, it looks like that would be a very energetic classroom because you have two teachers presenting that mural to get materials together so they can feed off each other. I just think that'd be very energetic and like performing on stage.
Yeah, that could be fun. They could really work, I mean, really go with that.
And then I think that also models working with, to our students, working with each other, not just the students working together, but it models the adults or the educators in that classroom working together. And that way it teaches our students how that we have to work together in order to make things happen and make things go smoothly in that classroom. I think with alternative teaching, I think it kind of manages behavior by focusing student learning. You're focusing the students on the learning, and that helps to control those behavior problems that we may see in the classroom. Also, it provides for immediate, corrective, and positive feedback, reinforcement, and that correction that our kids need. You know, if like someone said earlier, if you practice something wrong, then that's how you're going to learn to do it. Then, you know, so if we provide them with that immediate corrective feedback and be positive with that feedback, then that's going to improve their opportunities to succeed. And also with One Teach, One Assist, like I said already, you could closely monitor social and academic behaviors. And then with One Teach, One Observe is that data collection, which is very important, and progress monitoring as far as IEP goals and just progress monitoring students without those IEPs or 504 plans. Just so those are just some of the things that I took away from it. So you ladies want to add anything else, or are we good? Or
I think you pretty much summed it up.
All right, Miss Chastity, take it away.
Take it away. Okay, thank you guys for joining us for this week's session of Exceptional Educators Playbook. I'm excited that we learned how co-teaching is beneficial for all students. And I think that's very important. For deeper understanding and resources and more specific strategies, you can visit the Behavior Podcast Google Classroom by using the class code WOKFFR5. You can email Doug at doug.smith@theholler.org or doug.smith@hazard.kyschools.us. You can also visit our Facebook page, KVEC Exceptional Children, or also on Instagram, KVEC EC. Visit us on theholler.org under the Special Education tab. We have a Google site that houses all of our resources about anything, covers any topic that you would need, along with our other podcasts. So we hope that you can join us next month as we talk about developing goals and determining accommodations. So until next time, we'll holler at you later.
Thanks, folks.